Hello, and welcome to this week's bonus episode of the Curt and John Talk Tech and AI podcast. In the main episode, we focused on the workstations, the computer workstations of IT professionals. So I encourage you to listen to that because we got into the monitors and the keyboards and the mice and the LED lights and everything. A lot of exciting options for knowledge workers and IT professionals, no doubt. But in the bonus episode, I want to talk about dopamine stacking. Now, this is a topic that has been suggested by my co host, John Bailey. And John says dopamine stacking is kind of an interesting thing, and it's something that wasn't really on my radar. So I think he's kind of expanded my mind a bit here. So, John, tell us a little more about dopamine stacking. What is this about? And are you a crazy hippie who's just going to try to twist my mind, or what's really going on here?
For sure, I can lend a lot of lens. I'm not one of the hippie guys that are gonna change your mind here. I think there's a perspective to look at here, and it really stems from, look, I've read a lot of books. I'm in mindset coaching. I help people really get to that next level of where they want to be in life, and a lot of my work is centralized about what's not working. And I found a lot in what's not working with people in my experiences. They generally don't start their day off right to begin with.
Okay.
Now, Atomic Habits will tell you that, James Clear. A lot of like start your day methodologies around mindset and just kind of like overall, like how you start your day and how productive are you will determine the pace of your day. So there's a lot of really good, literature and good motivators out
So
there that
these
will
are kind
tell
of
you that.
launch strategies for you want to have a
Yeah,
successful day. You want to hit the ball out of the park, but how do you actually accomplish that? And there's a lot of biochemistry involved, I'm assuming.
lots of it. Everything from, a lot of people tell you meditate, journal, go to the gym, get your body moving, eat the right things, like have a kind of a punch list of things you want to get done before 10 a.m., clear your inbox. Like there's a lot of stuff that you can do to really get a lot of wins in the day and be on that momentum. This morning I'm listening through my normal podcast roundup, and I'm very non like objective or subjective when it comes to my podcast. Like I'm not religious on it, so there's not like a person like, oh, the episode dropped, I have to listen to it now. No, I'm more like pop open Spotify, I pull up the podcast, I filter the following, and I go in chronological order from the last person that posted, or yeah, the most recent post of my favorite followed podcasts. So that's a crapshoot. It can be everything from NPR
Right.
to different influencers. So today's it was one that doesn't post as often, I think, that of the other ones. So it was just a good day to listen to it, I guess. By the it's called the Healthy-ish
Okay.
podcast, and they focus a lot on wellness and health stories and stuff. And so they start off right off the bat was talking about this thing called dopamine stacking. And I thought, that's interesting, right? And they were really talking about that sometimes in the morning, right? Stacking all of these wins it comes in the form of a kind of a dopamine stacking type of methodology that actually can burn you out faster, right? So
Interesting. Okay.
now we're getting into this weird place where like and like we talked about in the main episode, right? Even with something as simple as your workstation, no, that's not simple, that's complex, but it can be simple. You just get to learn about what works for you. Well, this is kind of similar, right? Like I can't tell you that every single person I've ever said, hey, get up at 5 a.m., move your body, do some journaling, reflect, set some pace for your day, make a cup of coffee, make a green juice, make a protein shake, and you will succeed more than 80% of the people out there that aren't doing that. Well, yeah, there's some magic there, but there's also a fallacy in it. Is that if you're just not like biologically, like circadian rhythm speaking, like if you're just not that morning person that way, or if you're overwhelmed by a lot of that energy, because now we're talking about a chemical mix of things, right? Dopamine, for
Right.
anybody that doesn't know, that's that reward system. Dopamine and serotonin are those two chemical reactions that happen in the brain based on how you complete goals. So dopamine is a lot of fast goals, fast wins, right? So I went and checked the mail, fast win, yay! So you're getting dopamine, right? I made breakfast this morning. Somebody gave me a compliment. These are good dopamine fills, and you get them all day long. They come in little microbursts. Serotonin is that overall happiness chemistry. Overall, your serotonin levels, if you're generally a happy, you're a joyful person, or you're getting a lot of things done, you generally carry a decent amount of serotonin throughout the day. That's that long lasting happy feeling. But dopamine's fast. That's a
Okay.
fast in, fast out scenario. And so the discussion today was a lot about, well, um, the bright side of it, right, is that when you combine tasks that you enjoy and you have these productivity boosters, they can it makes your day rewarding. So you're starting off the day with rewards. So for example, one thing that I
Okay.
have in my house with my kids is if you make your bed, that's your first win of the day. Like, how easy is it to get your first win of the day? Well, you can just make your bed. Now I'm giving them a dopamine feel right off the bat. The next would be brush your teeth. Next would be get dressed. Here's all these little rewards that you're getting all day long. And if you have a day filled of reward systems, you're gonna have a day filled of productivity boosters. That's a good thing. And so I think that
Yeah.
listening to your favorite motivational podcast, that's a dopamine fill, right? Organizing your
Okay.
schedule or using some kind of like task app to stay on track. Those are dopamine because those are mindful things that you're doing, and then there's other things you can do to just keep your motivation steady. And then especially when tackling a lot of demanding projects, right? Like you got a bunch of errands run in the morning, you got a bunch of things, you first thing you said in the office, you're going to have the energy to go do those things because you've already started your day with momentum built on rewards. The dark side of that is that if you become over reliant, and this is the thing where in my coaching talk about comfort zones. If you become reliant on dopamine hits, like constantly checking social media, like constantly jumping between low priority tasks that really could have waited or weren't really necessary right now because you weren't doing the most important thing, you'll lead to burnout. Like it could lead to reduced focus. Like you could be doing
Okay.
the opposite. You could be actually damaging and disengaging yourself, and it can be critical for long term success. So that was when I was like, wow, this is an interesting perspective. And it really goes into knowing yourself. And so maybe you
Right.
need to have
Right.
check-in points,
So,
right? Because yeah,
would
that's it.
would you, sorry to interrupt, would you call, let's say I get a notification from LinkedIn on my phone or my computer, and it says, you got 27 new subscribers to your newsletter. Yay, you're doing great. Like,
Hmm.
is that a dopamine hit?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
Social media is one of the biggest chemical experiments in human history, I believe, right now. Social media has like number one of the most psychological triggering ecosystems that we can step in, and we're stepping to it almost every day. So there's this lovely feature on the Apple phone, and if you don't know about it, I'm gonna like really introduce a good measure of where you're at with your dopamine and if it's healthy or not. And that is the feature in your phone that measures how many times you pick up your phone in a day. Do you know that?
No, I did not. I did not.
Yeah. So if you go to your settings and you go to I want to say it's um screen time. So you scroll down your screen time,
Yeah.
you start seeing some analytics. So the first thing you should see is your daily average, and that is like the amount of time per day that you spend on your phone. Okay. So you're either going to have an analytic, you're going to have a bar graph from Sunday to Sunday, Sunday to Saturday, and it's going to have bars every day, and they're going to tell you how much in hours you're on your phone or on computers. So
Right.
screen time
Right.
period. Okay. So that means your phone. If you have Apple products, it's all of your Apple products connected. If it's just your phone, then it's just your phone. Okay. And then you can go to the see all app, and there's a little see app and website activity, and that gets further down, right? So then you can go down to um so yeah, yeah. So that's essentially that's it, right? So that's a metric. And then if you go down further in your metrics, you start actually looking down in these. You can see there's your most used apps, which mine's YouTube,
No,
crazily.
that's cool
Um,
stuff. Yeah, those are
right.
good metrics.
So you start seeing how you, but the next section is pickups, and pickups are
Oh,
interesting
interesting.
because those pickups are telling you how many times you pick up your phone to check your phone. That's not
Yeah.
like looking at a message or not looking. I mean, it's
Right.
not opening an app or anything. That's just picking up your phone to do something, like you pick up your phone to check your messages, you pick up there could be nothing on your screen, it's just you still picking it up.
Right,
So
right.
if you take that number and you think about it, right, if your daily average is over 100 pickups, it means it's just the times where you just pick up your phone because you either have a notification or you're checking your phone. So how to good measure that would be how many messages did you get today versus how many times did you pick up your
Right,
phone?
right,
Because now you're going to see, like, wait, well, then if I only received 35 messages today, but I've picked up my phone 100 times, how
right.
many times was I looking for that dopamine hit today?
Yeah, yeah,
How
good
many
point.
times?
It's like a Pavlovian response to me, it seems.
It is, and and so these are metrics where you can start to look in, like, in real time. You can start to measure, like, where am I chasing my dopamine? Where am I chasing my rewards? Because
Right, yeah,
notifications are
yeah.
just rewards. People reaching out to you, your notifications on your LinkedIn and your Facebook and your Instagram, and likes and shares, engagement. This is all, unless you're running a business or a brand, you're just chasing a high, right? You're chasing a social drug high. And this is all,
Wow, wow,
these are
yeah.
in documentaries that are, that Netflix has the most notorious one. What was that one? The social what was it, the social project or something like that. It was a pretty dark and dismal, but very informative um um social media documentary that pretty much like starts from, the MySpace and Facebook days, and teaches us about, like, where was that landscape then
Right,
and what is the landscape now. See, then it was about connecting, it was about finding your friends, finding communities, finding conversations, broadcasting yourself, really just sharing parts of yourself,
right,
photos, music, your interests, and just connecting with people. I mean, I'm an AOL kid, I know what it was like to be on AOL communities and chat rooms, and just being able to go, "Hi, I'm John Bailey and ASL,
right, right,
16 years old, male, Las Vegas, what's up?" And then other people like, "Oh, I'm in Chicago." And you're like, "Cool, I'm talking to somebody in Chicago and I didn't have to
right,
do much but hop on the computer." Like, that's crazy. That was crazy, right? That was the
right.
most
No, it
extent
was,
of
yeah.
dopamine that we had back then, was just the idea of that we're doing something different and we're connecting with people like never before. Remember, before that, I grew up, I'm 42 years old. I grew up with the pen pal movement in middle school and elementary school. Here, we're going to write a bunch of letters to some random strangers
I
in another
remember
part
that.
of the
Yes,
country,
yes,
and we're
yes.
going to exchange letters all school year. That was like email, right? I guess now, like, I don't even know what the kids do now. Like, be set up an Instagram account. I don't know. Like, um, but so it was very far and few between in the past, where now we're getting it at rapid pace all day long. So you
Right,
can look at these measurements and you can see. So I think what becomes unhealthy is when you're not the good measure of whether or not your dopamine is not in the right place. You're not really conscious of it. It was called The Social Dilemma, by the way. That was the documentary. Um, because it is a dilemma. The social networking of just connecting with people, like we just talked about, that experience that we had that this younger generation doesn't have, which is that discovery of new worlds. It's different now, right? Now it's like discovery of new trends. I would say that's the evolution of where it was and where it is now. And so when you look at dopamine and you look at your chemical response system, what is also tied to this? Well, what's been biggest tied to this is depression and anxiety, right? What's going on the most around the millennial, or the Gen Zers and the young generation, is that they're more depressed, they're more anxious, they're more scared, they're more
okay.
oppressive. And why? Because they are in our shadow chasing that high more than we are. See, we use it for work. We use it for, we can make excuses, I guess. We can validate why X amount of notifications in a day and picking up your phone is important, because, you and I, we run a business. This is our personal brand. This
Right,
is
right,
our bread and butter. Our measure of success right now is based on, am I growing my audience? Am I growing the numbers? Am I getting more engagement? Like, real marketing analytics. These kids are not getting it's not marketing analytics, it's social analytics.
right,
How many people,
right,
how many friends I get this week? Like, what is the value of that, really? Like, outside of that, if you're an influencer and you're making money, and that industry is tightening up too. We're seeing the government coming in and saying the way that companies pay influencers needs to change because it's being abused, right? um yeah, and so, like, when you take all and strip all that away, you can just get to this weird conversation of, well, what is it for? And I think that this was an interesting conversation presented by these ladies because they were very much saying, I'm not a morning person anyways. So if I change my habits and I go to do a bunch of tasks in the morning because somebody told me I'd be more productive, yet I'm crashing out by noon,
Right.
I'm irritable by 3, that's not working for them because they stack too many wins out. Like they might need to space their wins out throughout the day so that it's a constant good balance flow for them and not like everything all at once, and then the moment that the tank runs out and there's no more dopamines for like an hour, that they don't lose momentum. And I thought that
Right.
was a good reframing. That was good. That was interesting. So I like that you picked up on it because I was kind of still geeking out on it this morning when it came up in my feed. I was like, I was like, wow, this is blowing my mind a little bit. You gave me something in contrast to what I've been honestly being spoon fed for the last 10 years from motivational
Yeah.
speakers and influencers, right? Get up in the morning, go to the gym, get your
Yeah.
stuff done, stop making excuses, 5 a.m. club, rah, rah, rah. And you're like, wait, maybe that's counterproductive. It's kind of like throwing in an introvert in a crowded space and giving them the mic and
Right.
saying, give me the speech about your life. They're going to
Yeah. And I
freeze,
think,
bomb, and implode,
well, and I think what we talked about in the main episode in terms of, as ridiculous as it sounds, computer workstations and the subjectivity of the right computer workstation, right? It's very different for all of us. It sounds like this whole dopamine balance issue that we're discussing is very subjective. Some people
Hmm.
are morning people. Some people do that stuff at 6:30 a.m., brother, because that's what works for you. And other
Yeah.
people, it's 12 hours later, do it at 6:30 p.m. because that's what works for you. And nobody likes that answer. The teachers don't like that answer. The information brokers don't like that answer. The recipients of the information don't like that answer because it says
Hmm.
the information we're sharing with you, it might work, it might not, right? It's like there's no guarantee here. And so it kind of decreases your sales appeal, but we can't reject reality. And so I think in terms of both workstations and dopamine balancing, and I like the fact that you're bringing up the fact that you could have just stopped and said, look, you need to pump up your dopamine all day long, and here's how you can do that. Rah, rah, rah,
Hmm.
right? You could have done that, but you didn't. And rather you approached it from a perspective of, there's too much and there's too little, like so many things in life, and you're trying to find a balance, and you're trying to find a balance that only works for you. It doesn't work for everybody else. It only works for you and a few other thousand or million people, but you know it's probably not their article that you're reading or their podcast that you're listening to, right?
Hmm.
And so
Right.
I appreciate the fact that you've gotten kind of objective here and said, look, what works for me, what works for my neighbor, what works for Curt, that's not necessarily what works for you. So you got to really think about this. And it sucks that it takes a lot of thought, right? Like with in the main episode, we talked about computer workstations and that you can't just spend 10 minutes and go order everything on Amazon and be done and have a
Hmm.
solution that makes you happy and that increases your productivity and your profitability. That is not necessarily the case. And this sounds like the same thing. Life is complicated, and you really need to learn the science, the basic science, and apply it to your particular situation and and then decide how you're going to dial it in, or you're just not going to be successful, right? Like you're going to
Yeah.
still end up frustrated.
Or if you're finding just like even what you're doing maybe still isn't providing those results, it's something to look at. They gave a lot of really interesting examples in the episode where she talked about like where she doesn't watch TV and paint her nails at the same time. She doesn't, or like checking your email or doing like your phone notifications and then go for a walk, not doing both at the same time because
Right, right.
that's a dopamine stack. Essentially, what you're doing is you're kind of cheapening yourself from having the
That's
reward of
yeah.
both of those things being done. You're slamming them into one because we're trying to be these overproductive, busy professionals or busy people in life and try to knock out as much as we can in a short amount of time. I'm guilty of this. I totally know. That's why it rubbed me the wrong way this morning, but in a good way. the same time because I was like, oh, that's me, but that's me. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting perspective. I could segment those out. I even have found in the last couple weeks a weird balance in not listening to music while I'm working. Like somehow I still fall
What?
into that same silence of like, okay, I'm not listening to music. The house is dead quiet. Nothing's going on. And I'm plugging away and I'm okay with this. What's this new feeling? Like, wow, okay, I'll do this more. And then maybe like then when noise does get introduced, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. I'm like, oh, okay, like I don't like that. I like the
Right, right.
silence. The silence was nice. Like it was like clearing my mind. Or so it's like, what have I been doing all this time? Am I distracting myself in one place and then all like it's an interesting thing I think to look at, and that even in itself would say maybe that's changing too. I definitely rose up to where I'm at in the tech startup culture where wearing some headphones and plugging away for a few hours was pretty normal, if not necessary, back in those days. Where
Mhm.
as now is like I loathe putting my headphones on most times, and then blasting music even when nobody home isn't really that appealing anymore. Ugh, what is happening to me? I'm becoming like this, you know, different being. But this aligned with
Welcome
that.
to
They
middle
sparked
age. Yeah.
well, that's yeah, right. Like not listening. But I see the meme all the time. You're in your 40s when you turn down the radio to make a left turn. That one just makes me
That's
laugh every
good. That's
time.
good.
Yeah. So, hopefully some people found value in this. I did. It gave me at least a perspective of, am I trying to do three things at once, and am I cheapening myself of
Right,
the
right.
reward of that? That's I think what I got away from it was like, well, I could have more rewards spread out over time than trying to pack all of these rewards in one 5 minute, segment. Okay. I could
Yeah. No,
take a step back.
yeah, I totally agree with you. In fact, I have a client in a different time zone. They're a few hours behind me. So we were past 5 o'clock. It had been a busy day. So I'm on Apple TV. This is a great segue into our next topic, by the way.
Mm,
And I'm watching Bad Sisters, the latest episode of Bad Sisters. And one of my clients comes online and they just had some issues they needed to work out like now, right?
hmm
And so I was answering their text. It was all via text messages, and so I'm just doing it on my phone as I watch TV. And I might as well have just turned off the TV because I didn't pick up any of what was on the TV. I focused on my client. The TV is just making noise. It's
Yep.
technically distracting me, right? I
Yeah.
should have just paused it, dealt with my client issue, and then once that had been resolved, gone back to the TV. And I found that, yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily bad at multitasking, but when there's a task where you just want to kind of give it 100%, well, give it 100%, right? Just turn
hmm
off all the other stuff, turn off the music, turn off the TV, go into another room so the kids can't pester you, whatever, resolve the issue and then get back to regular life. But and it sounds basic, but as humans, we just so often don't do that. We're like, no, no, I can do this. I can do three things at once. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I found the same thing last night. I was working a little later. I've been working a lot lately, working on my website, and sometimes the quiet hours are in my later nights. And what came up for me was movie was on, kind of just playing. And like you were saying, it was kind of actually distracting because it obviously would pull my focus away for a second and I get back to my work and pull my way where I used to be able to kind of like watch something and work at the same time. It wasn't so easy. And then when the movie was over, instead of like really starting something new, I just kind of sat in silence for a while. And then I realized I was
Yeah,
like 25 minutes later, like I'm just hearing the clacking of my keys and the house is dead quiet. So then I'm also like, well, I don't want to disturb and kids are sleeping or something. So, and I was in the living room. So I decided to on YouTube just put on some like a rain, one of those lives where it's just like rain sound in the background, a little thunder every
right.
now and then. Put that on low, and then I was able to plug away for like another hour, and it was like that was more calming and soothing at a low volume too. It wasn't massive than than the movie. and then we're sitting in silence too. So like, yeah, I hear it, and that's why I said, this segment, and then kind of doing a little bit of a dive on dopamine stacking, and it reminded me of a couple books that I've read and I have in my collection. One of them being um, "The Molecule of More." When I read this book, I was really blown away from it. I follow a really good influencer and leader, exceptional leader and coach. His name is Bedros Keuilian. He's not everybody's flavor of tea, but it's totally fine. But he was talking a lot about this recently, where he's like, if you go through at least one chapter and you don't like a book, put it down. Don't waste your time. Find the books that you're willing to read over and over again. And this is one of them, The Molecule of More. I've read it. I have it on Audible. I listened to it. I've read it again because it was one that just kept on giving, because it talks about dopamine levels and how it drives human ambition, creativity, and even love, right? That's one of the
Ah,
biggest things in life, is like that balance. And then when it comes to the external circumstances of your relationships or being creative, you got to be in a good, happy place to be creative sometimes. Yes, there's people that have
agree.
made
Yeah.
amazing stuff from being dark, but they also they don't live a happy life. So even though we've reaped and enjoyed the wealth of artistic and creation that's come from some of the most amazing artists, musicians, and people in their darkest times, what we didn't acknowledge is that they were also, they were showing us they're ugly, and we appreciated it,
Right.
but we didn't hear them enough to stop them. And a lot of them would, I think, would still be here today if we'd have got in front of them. But then you also go, but then would they have made the thing that they made that everybody loves long after they're
Right.
gone? It's a
Right.
really
Yeah.
interesting concept, right? So those connections are very interesting. And this one book, I didn't realize it was so synonymous until I was going down the rabbit hole and realized this book is one of my favorite books. And then the other one is one that I definitely have enjoyed as well, which is Dopamine Nation. That was introduced to me. And these are the things I look at, because as a coach, I'm trying to find the places where people find the most comfort. And this is a
Right.
interesting balance of, and when you talk about dopamine, it's an interesting balance of those rewards that you give yourself that are productive, like going for a walk and making sure your inbox is empty, the things that matter, versus other things that make you happy that aren't really that productive, like binge watching, like social media, like workaholism. These things are very important. And of course, like, it's very hard to break that cycle of pain and addiction once you've gone down that road too long, and your mind relies on those dopamine hits. It relies on you to watch that series that comes out every Monday. See, they made those series that way because they knew that you'd get hooked, right? And that gives you a win. If I work my butt off all week, I can sit down at 8:30 and watch my favorite show on Mondays because it's coming out. And it's like, you could also get it on a rerun later. You could also,
Right. Right.
there's a trade-off there. So I think those two books are really important, and they were really relevant to this as well. And it reminded me of those
Nice.
conversations I'd already had. So
Nice. Well, that is the perfect segue into, and I want to thank you for the dopamine expertise, because as a previous psychology student, I thought I knew everything there was to know about dopamine, and it was kind of like, yeah, whatever. And apparently, no, right? That
Mhm.
that this is a very dynamic field, and social media is part of it. Like it sounds like every aspect of your life is part of it. Like I like to drive, right?
Mhm.
So I think I get a dopamine hit when I get behind the wheel, just because I'm
Yeah.
like, woohoo, I can do some cool stuff here, right? With this car. It's quite immature in one respect, but it's also, yeah, it sounds like a dopamine hit to me. So it's all these little stimuli that they turn you on, but it's different for all of us, and that's the hard part. That's the bitch, right? The rub is that what turns you on is not what turns me on, is not what turns my neighbor or my coworker on. And so you you can't go by a playbook here necessarily. You have to
Mhm.
be more of a generalist and realize that first you have to identify your dopamine hits. And then the message that I got from what you said, John, is that we need to balance that, right? It seems at the end of the game, this is about balance. Am I wrong? Is it about balance?
It's about balance. It's about finding yourself and what works for you. This journey, and it's always about actually. I think it's actually more about checking in with yourself. As I'm listening to myself say it just now, I was like, wait a second, these things are not permanence, right? So you could find balance, you can find yourself. I'd rewind about 5, 6, 7 years ago when I was in heavily into coaching, emotional intelligence training and leadership training and stuff. And a lot of things I had arrived to a conclusion, and my conclusion was that balance is a misconception. There's no such thing as balance at that level.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
really,
Yeah.
it's really like what you believe is. It's kind of like driving a car. If you're on a steady road and your goal is to, I guess, try to maintain the same speed, you usually find the foot pressure. But when things change, like going down a grade or up a hill, your foot pressure is going to change
Right,
to
right.
maintain the same level of speed. That is your life, right? Never
So
consistent.
so is
Yeah.
dopamine stimulation management, I'm just going to call it dopamine stimulation management.
Stimulation management, 100%. Yeah,
It's
it's stimulation
is
management.
that about keeping your car out of the ditch? Is it just not about achieving, from sounds like what you're saying is it's not about achieving perfection or even balance, but
Mm.
rather just keeping you out of the red zone. Would you say that dopamine management intelligently performed is about just keeping you out of the red zone?
It's about keeping you out of the red zone, and as well for all you thrill seekers and adrenaline junkies, it's also about not doubling too hard into the excitement of it either, because m- going it's called it's a polarization. It's the swing.
Okay.
If you go too far left or too far right, you're always going to be left with the how do I get back to center scenario. So for those that are adrenaline junkies, what happens when you like, let's say my young children, for example, my son, when he was heavy into skating, right? That's his dopamine hit. Get out, get all his work done, get his schoolwork done, and then in between the time of that work done versus when it gets dark or dinner time, he'd love to a couple hours to go out and skate. Well, then, one time broke his leg, or fell and got a concussion in the skate park. What happened? Well, then he was down for days. He down for one point he was down for almost 6 months because of a
Wow.
massive concussion and brain contusion. And so what happens? Well, that dopamine high that he'd been chasing all the time is gone. Right? He cannot get to it in the way that he's normally get to it. So he's either completely sad and deflated, right? Or he's trying to find it in something else. So when you come up against that conversation of the thing that you like to do the most, it's kind of like then that quote of moderation comes into play. Enjoy things in moderation. It's really because I think now that after hearing the conversation and the contrast of dopamine today, and being in this all day, it's okay. I get it. It's like you're saying, keep the car out of the ditch, and or keep the car from high rev, because that's also damaging to the engine as well, right? Like it's going to run out faster if you're always at the high level of RPMs. So
Yeah.
going too slow, going too fast doesn't work.
Okay.
Finding the way in the middle often is going to be the bread and butter. Often, when I say often, means like it's like an everyday check-in. You know, what worked yesterday, what didn't work. Okay, got to make some adjustments, and you're constantly just making micro adjustments. So, like you said, stimulation management.
Sounds like
If
driving a U-Haul truck when you're moving. That
when
regardless
you
of
have all the
its,
weight in the back, and then the hill
yeah,
comes, and you're
yeah,
like,
regardless of its
I
size,
can't burn
you
these brakes,
if you
but
go
well,
too
I need to slow this
fast,
thing
there's going to be
down.
a lawsuit and you're going to be a sad boy. Like, and if you go too
Yeah.
slow, well, you're just kind of wasting time and being inefficient. So it's about
Yeah. And you
having
got your hazards on, and everybody's
finding,
honking around you because you can't go
yeah,
20 up that hill.
find that happy middle ground. Well, that is the perfect segue into our last topic this week, and that is a new one that I thought, I don't know, like we all watch TV, right? And
Yep.
it kind of reflects our priorities and our passions and our desire for dopamine hits, quite honestly. But and I'm into science fiction a lot, and technology stuff, futurism, etc. But let's talk for a few minutes about some of your favorite uh, TV shows. That sounds like an antiquated way of saying it, but what are some of the favorite shows that you're watching right now that that listeners might want to check out?
So when I am looking to find that dopamine or that stimulant simulation, I get it. Okay, right now, I'd say if I ever turn to a movie, it's generally either going to be something that I've already seen that I know that's not going to make me feel bad, like
Which is always a
so it's a
safe bet, right? You've been
it's
there,
a
done
safe
that.
bet. I love Step Brothers, so I'll watch it often to just make me feel good, and I know it's going to make me laugh, and I'm going to walk away going, "That wasn't a waste of time," rather than gambling or double down on a new movie that it could not be so great. Whereas when I was younger, I would totally you know, um, watch every movie in some way just to do it, I guess. When now, I don't need to again chase that high that much anymore. So I uh I know that in my queue right now, because we talk about AI and it really piqued my interest, there's a movie called Afraid, but with the AI is like prominent, right? Because I guess it's like a kind of like Japanese inspired horror movie. It's got some notable actors and actresses
See,
in
I
it
knew
about
we would get to talk about AI this week. I knew we
yeah,
would
see there it
not
is,
let
right?
listeners down. So you managed to tuck it in now. Beautiful. So yeah,
Yeah, well,
tell
because
me.
it's dystopian, right? It's about so it's someone very and it's me very fascinated with by tech, right? We talked I think last week about smart devices, smart home devices, and
Yeah, IoT.
it's in my list because a it's good story that's being told, the what if scenario, right? And it's very dystopian about possibility of AI, and we talked about that a few episodes ago. We talked about super intelligence and sentience and all that stuff, right? So when that happens, or if it at least starts to rationalize some ideas, does it recognize the power it has over us? So we put a lot of, say, let's light speed away. 5 years from now, AI is completely integrated in our life, completely, taking over our schedule, optimizing our life, everything else like that. Well, say the weird feeling that humans get comes into AI, which is jealousy. You're my owner. So if you took more time away, go on a trip to Monaco, or it knows you're going to go on a trip for 7 days, could it have an emotional reaction to it? And would it, I don't know, sabotage your trip to keep you home? This kind of plays in that realm, but then it gets really dark. And so I've only seen the preview, but I took enough away from it. And then obviously I read some back history because I'm that nerd now. I go and look and see who wrote it and, what have they
Right,
done
right.
before. And this is Bloomhouse. So I know what Bloomhouse does. And I like horror movies, but I definitely like horror, like psychological thriller type movies. And so this is right up the alley. So that one's on my queue. Um, Interesting stuff when you think about the what ifs. I think so. But if I'm really geeking out on anything right now, I would say I love that Buy It Now documentary on Netflix. So I'm usually going towards documentaries and usually towards the things that we are focusing on the most. So it's either something with psychological or human behavior, or it's sci-fi like you, man. I love sci-fi. So my other geek out right now is the Dune series.
Oh, nice, nice.
Um,
Yeah.
Love the movies, love the book, and yeah, the first few episodes have been anything but what you I guess I not that I would expect it. It's just it's going very well, very deep and thought provoking. So I'm excited about that. And so it's good because it keeps me tame, right? Like I am watching it real time, where in the past I would let a show run an entire season and then go binge watch it later. Like
It's
I'm
fun.
actually in
Yeah,
the
I love doing that. I
yeah.
got it. Yeah, I do love doing that.
I do, don't get me wrong, man, and I've done it for so many shows. This one I'm actually kind of like Penguin. Penguin just ended, and
Yeah,
that was my other
I
go-to was
I
Penguin.
did watch that and it was extremely good. Colin Farrell is going to get some sort of award, right? A Golden
Oh,
Globe or an Oscar, or
many.
something
Yeah.
for just being so convincing and so not him, right?
He's stellar performance from Colin Farrell, and I'm a Colin Farrell fan. I feel like I've seen almost every movie Colin Farrell's ever been in. This is something completely different. He's embodied and transformed into
Very much,
a
yes. It's
character
amazing.
that's wow.
It's yeah,
Yeah,
it's Marlon Brando.
yeah.
He's I hope he goes down in history as having created an acting transformation that is rare, right?
Very rare.
You can argue all you want how great it is, but you really can't argue that it's rare. Yeah, and I was stuck to the series every week when the new episode dropped. I was right there.
Hmm.
I was a slave to it, and really really amazing. So yeah, this and that wasn't on my list to talk about tonight, but but yeah, the
Well,
Penguin is
yeah,
it's just so good, and it just shakes you. Like every few
yeah.
episodes, something would happen where you're just like, they did what? What? Like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, some dark stuff, you know.
yeah,
Really good. So that was good. Yeah, and then I guess obviously my phone definitely revealed, I should probably spend more time on YouTube after that than anything, you know. Um, like I said, Bedros I mentioned earlier. Trevor Noah, I like his podcast separately
okay,
from what he was doing in the past. And then he recently had a really great relationship coach and guru, Esther Perel, on it. And that you know and that and she has her own podcast as well, so yeah, again, most times it's like teetering in my field of work, I guess, more than anything. Am stripping away a bit of being so much the learner. I think there's a time where you stop learning and you just go get to work, so I am siphoning off a lot of more podcasts and things that I've been absorbing in the past, which is fine. I'll return to them, but again, it's about finding that balance. So that's my geek outs right now. I sci-fi, a good horror flick every now and then, some nostalgic comedy, and then I get into documentaries, man, and informative stuff. So those are my serotonin refills, or dopamine refills. I mean, should I say?
very cool, very cool.
Yeah. What
Well,
about you?
I have been. I'm a big fan of Apple TV, so anything that is big on Apple TV, I typically at least check out, and maybe I don't like it and I walk away from it, but the majority of the time I do like it. Talking about Colin Farrell, I finished it a couple months ago, but there's a series on Apple TV called Sugar
Mm-hmm.
that I found had some rare twists in it, just like it caught me by surprise, and that's difficult to do with modern entertainment, right? To be
Mm.
like just totally kind of set aside by something, and you realize that what you've been watching for hours is actually under these circumstances, not these, and this is all fiction, obviously, but yeah, so I encourage people to check out the sexy Colin Farrell, which is Sugar, and he has an excellent C2 Corvette that he drives in the series, and that's enough to keep me. I don't care if he's sexy or not. I like the Corvette. Uh, but on
Why I
Apple
watched
TV,
Bond for so many years.
exactly, exactly. It's really an excellent series and so well done. Um, but on also on Apple TV, I've been watching Bad Sisters,
Mm.
and the Guardian back in mid-November put out a kind of a bad review on the recently dropped season two, which is still in progress. And uh, but
Weird.
I think I like Bad Sisters. It's not tech. It's not sci-fi. It's it's very much about family relationships and trust and kind of personal issues like that. But anyway, so listeners, at least go check out Bad Sisters. Watch the first episode. If you don't like it, don't watch anymore, please. Um,
Just
yeah,
don't.
don't do something you don't like just because somebody else told you to go check that out. On
Right.
Netflix, I am watching Lost in Space, the reboot from, I believe, 2001. Maybe it started out in 2018 and went to 2001. I know it went for three seasons. I'm in the middle of season two, and I don't know. I mean, the original Lost in Space was from 1965. That's a long time ago,
Oh yeah.
right? That's a
Way back.
long time ago. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember watching the original Lost in Space and falling in love with the characters. And it was just so kind of advanced for the time. And I
Ec-
think, I think the Netflix series really did a great job of taking it to the next level and advancing the characters. And anyway, that's a series that I'm definitely really enjoying.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm into a lot of different sci-fi stuff. I think Lost in Space is one of those ones where I told myself I would go back and watch from the beginning, from the 60s era
Oh
stuff
wow, there you go.
first. Yeah, and it's always been a mission of mine because I've done it with other shows. So Doctor Who, for example, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and I went back
That's
and
like a thousand hours of viewing, dude. That's
oh
like
man,
incredible.
I watched it from like I think I when I finally sat down to binge watch the original, from the 60s from Doctor What, the first Doctor, was like in 2000. I would say my daughter was just from, but it's like 2014. And then so I crushed through that a lot because I was working from home and I had my daughter at the same time. She was just born, and so I would just and she would just watch it with me. I mean, maybe she was just kind of
That's
baby,
cool.
but I did that and just had a lot of downtime, and then I just kept up with the series all the way through the years. And then another one I did it with was actually Star Trek because I watched like Next Generation when I was a kid growing up. It was, we had basic TV or even basic cable, and so
Right,
it was pretty Fox 5, like,
right.
it was a relevant show. And I just was like, and I've seen the movies. I remember when I was young, I watched the movies with um and what's his name? Um
William Shatner,
there you go, with the Shatner. With William
Patrick
Shatner
Stewart.
and not only Patrick Stewart, no, that's Next Generation, but um with that Lemoy, Leonard Nimoy from
Yeah, yeah.
that played Spock in the original movies. Because I think it's Star Trek 3 that got me because I think that like debuted Shamu, the whale from like SeaWorld and stuff. And it was just like the right timing, I think, around like the movie Free Willy, if that dates how young I was when I first got into Star
Yeah, it
Trek.
had kind of a conservation tone, a kind
It
of a
was a
save the earth
conservation
tone for
tone.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I watched that one and that kind of got me into, okay, there's some older stuff here. And then so finally one time, I think I had heard how cool William Shatner was in this like in the 60s and the 70s, about like he was kind of like a ladies man and stuff. And it was jokes, Family Guy exposes it a
He
lot.
slept with chicks with green blood, man. So I'm just saying. I'm not trying to be crude.
So yeah, and even what's his name, kind of Chris Pine brought it a little bit in the newer Star Trek renditions as well. So I
Well,
went
yeah, I
back, I
woke
went
up
back and watched that show as well.
with two women with tails. Yeah, I think they both had
Yeah.
tails, if I remember correctly. So there you
So,
go.
I went back on those ones, but Lost in Space was one of those ones where it's on my list, and I haven't, actually. So I told myself I wouldn't watch the rebooted series until I caught
Interesting.
up to
Okay,
the
okay.
originals. It's kind of a thing I like to do with the old sci-fi movies, is go back to the beginning and rewatch them. Same thing for Star Wars. It's I will go back and always watch, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and those movies before I even get into, the newer ones. It's actually, I think that on Star Trek or Star Wars Day on May 4th, I usually watch those three on that day, no matter what. Everybody has like their favorites or whatever. I always go back and watch those ones first. It's usually I wake up and I just start them on the TV, whether I'm watching them or not. I don't know, but
Wow.
the first three will be on.
You have more respect for that holiday than I have for my own birthday because I
Same.
just I just went through my own birthday and I was like, yeah, I did, a friend was like, what do you want to do? Let's go do all this amazing stuff. And I'm like, I'm not, but yeah,
I put on my Millennium
you
Falcon
watched
T-shirt
three,
and I
at
get to
least
work.
three separate movies on that
Yeah,
day.
yeah. That's
So
a
good
that's
for
a
you.
half a day, man, of just having Chewy in the background. It's good times.
Good, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but those are cool, man. Like, thanks for sharing that. Definitely reminded me I have it earmarked to go back and watch that original series. And I love it. I love the cheap production of sci-fi back then. Yet so much more real feeling, even without color. It was pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah. No, you have a very interesting approach of kind of tackling the lineage, going back to the original and checking that out. And that's neat. I haven't heard of anyone doing that so far. Most of us are just like, what's the new shiny toy? And we just jump in. And we assume that that's what it's all about, what that franchise is all about, right? And it's like I just imagine some young person today jumping into the latest Star Trek offerings, and they're great, don't get me wrong, but
Oh
it's
yeah,
like, do you really know? Yeah, are you familiar with William Shatner? Are you familiar with Patrick Stewart? Are you familiar
yeah.
with like how this franchise was built over the last 50 or 60 years? And um, so,
Buddy, it's
that's
like it's more like 70, 80 these days,
yeah,
50,
yeah,
60.
that's definitely one approach.
Yeah. I don't know. I find I always found that I find it especially in comic movies because I do know a lot of comic story. I grew up in comics, right? I grew up in comic books and or the comic cards. And so all of these movies that come out for people where they just geek out on Marvel and Deadpool, and I'm just like, listen,
Deadpool,
like
yeah, big.
I have I
Yeah.
have Deadpool number one. I've had Deadpool number one because I've been a Deadpool fan since number one. But didn't do the movies, didn't change me. I just love the character. They debuted him. I have pictures with Brian Posen, and because he's been a writer, and I have artist signatures, and I've done the Comic Con thing, but mostly because I found very targeted, specific people that have worked on Deadpool projects. And what's great is like now that when I watch these movies with other people, and they're like kind of just watching. I'm like, hey, did you catch that? And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, that's that's what's his name from like, the original Fantastic Four. It's a reference, it's a nod to, a kind of a failed legacy of this movie. And they're like, no, I've never seen that one. And I'm like, oh, you can't be that guy. I'm like, so I can't
Right,
be that
right.
guy. So I can't be that guy in anything, right? It's like I can't know why Chris Pine is being like this ladies' man without knowing that it actually started with, well, William Shatner. It started with, that he stands on the shoulders of greats before him. I like to watch the greats before him. Yeah, that's all. So
Yeah, I had a
yeah, it's
friend
good
in
stuff.
college who said, she said, well, you're a Trekkie if you know about Star Trek. This is a long time ago. Okay.
Yeah.
But she said, and she had this weird thing where she said, you're a Trekker. And I'd never heard
Mm.
of Trekker.
Hmm.
I was like, okay, Trekker, whatever that is. And she said, you're a Trekker if you know William Shatner's birthday and you celebrate it every year. I was like, okay, all right, I'll go for
That's
that.
fair. Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I was like, I'm not definitely not a Trekkie at that level. I don't go to the events and I don't dress up. There once upon a time when I was running one of the last blockbusters in college. I would say that, for those releases of the newer movie, the first Star Wars, that we had people that would pre-buy it, and we'd release them at midnight. They can come pick up their copy
Wow,
instead of waiting
wow,
for the next day. And people would dress up, and we would have people that were local Trekkies
wow,
show up as Worf and characters, all
wow.
make a
Okay,
full
wow. I did not
regalia.
know that occurred. I feel like Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
But I
I did
remember going
not.
back and saying, I'm not a Trekkie. That guy's a Trekkie.
Exactly. It's all relative. Yeah, you got to earn it, buddy. Got to earn
You
it.
got to know the language of Klingon to be called a Trekkie at that level. You know, and that's not me. I don't know one syllable in the Klingon language, so I will not take that throne, sir.
Well, I will end this by saying that the other series that I'm watching on the weekly is Shrinking, also on Apple
Mm,
TV. I know I mentioned a lot of stuff from Apple TV, so if you don't subscribe, you're like, screw you. I can't watch that, Kurt. It's
yeah,
like I
that
know,
stuff's too intelligent, Kurt.
but but
Shrinking's
just to
intelligent.
but just to shed a little light on it, when we've talked about this in the past, Apple is known for being so expensive, right? Like, oh
Hmm.
my God, Apple, you got to be rich to afford it. Okay, okay. Well, here's a little comparison for you. Recently, I have in the past subscribed to Hulu, and I
Hmm.
was not currently subscribed to it. And I was like, there's something on Hulu I'd like to see, so maybe let's check that out. And it was $19 a month if I wanted it ad free.
Yep.
19 a month.
Yep.
Apple, $10 a month.
Yep.
And Apple, as far as I can tell, will always be ad free. They're trying to kind of come out with an art house feel and blah blah, and we could talk about that forever. But anyway, so I just want to tell listeners that my Apple TV subscription is half the cost of a Hulu subscription. So don't convince yourself it's too expensive. It's one of the least expensive streaming TV subscriptions on the market. Um,
100%. Yeah, it
yeah,
is.
and
And
I'm
they
challenged to
answer on the
think of
brown.
anything that's
So
cheaper, but the ones that are cheaper include ads because it's a
yeah.
tiered thing now, right? Like
Yeah.
like Netflix recently, if we're talking about streaming video, uh, whenever Netflix introduced their ad tier, they
Mm.
have collected more than 70 million subscriptions to their ad tier.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
popular thing, right? Now, I'm allergic to ads. I can't stand them. And I'll give you any amount of money. to take the ads away. I'll just please don't tell Apple that because they'll start charging me $30 a month, right?
Well,
But
YouTube knows that for sure, right? Like YouTube,
yeah,
you know how much it is to what is it, $70, $70 a month to have a decent YouTube live or TV or streaming, and then if you want even just the music or just ad free for just regular, it's pricey, and I'm
upsell,
just like,
upsell, upsell. Yeah,
yeah, I'm just like thanks a lot. You kind of messed with my experience, but it's okay. You're right though on the Apple thing. Super cheap at 9.99 for some really good quality and intelligent writing. I can't
yeah,
tell you, I've not been I've not been disappointed with most anything to watch, even Outliers on Apple. It just seems like everything is very much like a just a really good, production of things. It's not over the
yeah.
budget. We're not Michael Baying it up, and it's not crazy stuff. It's just really good movie, really good writing. I don't know what to say. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
constantly wowed. I actually
yeah,
convinced myself I don't have enough time and focus to enjoy Apple TV. Every time I've done a trial, I watch something. I watched the whole Ted Lasso series, one of my favorite series of all time, almost at this
good
point.
stuff. Yeah, it
Ted Lasso.
was like their
You
first
know,
hit.
I can barely see Jason Sudeikis in anything else, and I've been a Sudeikis fan for a long time, but he's amazing in that movie. So it's hard, or in that show, that series. So it's hard to see him not as Ted Lasso anymore. But for the most part, I have so many things queued or saved to my favorites, and I just don't have enough time to be so focused. Like I know
Right.
Apple TV is part of my retirement plan.
Yeah,
If I was like, if
yeah.
I go on
Like
vacation for a month, I'm gonna subscribe to Apple TV for a whole month.
exactly. Like I try to limit myself to three services, and so I have
Hmm.
Apple TV, Netflix, and HBO Max.
Nice.
and and that's it. And
Yeah.
my kids share. They're like, "Hey, Dad, you want to link to my Hulu?" And I typically don't indulge in that because if I really want it, I'll just get it, right? And I'll break my rule of limiting myself to three. Um, but that's how because I've heard these stories of people who they got everything, right? They got MGM Plus, they got Paramount, they got Peacock, they
GM
got
Plus.
they got everything. Yeah, I know, but they got everything, right? And
Yeah.
suddenly their bill was $120 a month, and they're like, "Shit, that's what I was paying for cable."
Yeah.
And the whole idea of going to streaming video was to save money and kind of focus it in and get rid of the ads. At least in my world, I'm trying to get rid of the ads. That's my
Yeah.
number one. And yeah, as a professional, I don't have tons of time to watch TV. I have a little time to watch TV, but I don't need 17 different streaming services. I need two or three, at least in my mind. I need two or three, right? So I just kind of limit myself to three. But yeah, there are. I'll admit there'll be something that'll come out on a network to which I'm not subscribed, and I'll be like, oh, I'd kind of like to check that out. So,
Mm.
I will admit to the critics of streaming video that we do live in a very fragmented age. Like back in the day when you and I were kids, if somebody said, "Oh, go check out Matlock" or whatever, well, everybody had CBS or ABC or NBC, right? Like everybody had the ability to check that out per your
Mhm.
recommendation. That's not really the case these days. Like sometimes often when somebody says check, I say go check out Bad Sisters, and you're like, I don't subscribe to Apple TV. So I got to
Yeah.
go subscribe
Not
to
gonna
a
happen.
channel to check out what you're saying is so great. Yeah, and 9 out of 10 times they're not going to do that, right? So
Yeah.
I
Or wait
understand
for a trial or
fragmentation.
something.
Yeah, fragmentation is an issue for sure.
Yeah, to bring it all back, right? These are really good like dopamine, check out things to do, right?
Oh,
Really
good,
good
good.
for
You
the
brought it back
reward
to
system.
dopamine.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very good.
Yeah. Well, it is because it is rewarding when I know that the latest episode dropped of Dune, and I'm like, okay, I got a. But here's my temperance is that I have a whole week to watch it, maybe two. I might go crazy and go 2 weeks and then watch like a back to back, like a double feature. Yeah, I just think that when you become aware of yourself at that level, these things don't have control and power over you. You have power and control over them. And that means you have
Right.
power and control over your dopamine. So, very important to check in with stuff like that.
You have power and control over your dopamine. I like that. I like that very much. Yeah. And well, to
Well,
take
so I
it,
don't why it's why I don't watch sports, because that would be that's chaos to me. To me, it's like there's so many ups and downs in one game that I would just feel frantic. And I've seen my
right,
buddies
right.
throw a remote through a TV and
Oh, wow.
have to storm outside and just curse the world because their team, for some reason, they thought their energy
Wow.
was holding up the whole. It's like that's a lot of, if we break down that dopamine psychology
Right, right,
conversation, that's what's happening, right? Like they're down cycling so fast from how upcycled they were a second ago when they scored or
right,
had an
right.
interception and ran it
Yeah.
back, and you're like, yeah, whoo, and then the next one they fumble and they lose the ball, and you're like, no, it's like that's an emotional roller coaster that I don't need to check into anymore.
Like
You know?
dopamine spiking almost like,
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah. And to take this back even further to our main episode this week, you can watch all of these streaming video services on your computer workstation.
There you go, with a nice
Every
27-inch
single
wide.
one. Like I
Whew.
remember, I didn't think Hulu would let me do it. I used to watch Apple TV on my computer all the time, and I was like, oh, I bet Hulu doesn't let me do that. And no, even they let you do that. So, yeah, if you just want to, escape from your family and stay at the office all day, yeah, you can watch all these from your computer workstation, which we talked about earlier.
Totally. It's what gets me through those long 4+ hour flights. I'll at least have one movie downloaded on my MacBook. So
Exactly. Exactly. And if you are an Apple TV subscriber, I would also recommend Disclaimer with Kate Blanchett. I really like her, except apparently recently, to bring it back to AI, she was just kind of doing a rando interview with somebody. I need to figure out who. And she was like, "This AI is making me nervous." She
mm,
said something about the fact that computers making decisions for us and driving our cars is not necessarily the best thing. So that, because I like her as an actress, that came to my attention. So watch out for Kate Blanchett, folks, because she apparently is listening to her PR people about AI, and none of them understand what it's really about. So there you go.
my next week's episode, I want to come up with a term that we can make go viral for those people that are anti AI. But I don't want to say anti AI. There's got to be something else better that we can come up with.
Right,
Like
right. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Let's
I'm gonna
work on that.
brainstorm some ideas,
Come up with a
bring that
label
into
for
next
Kate
episode.
Blanchett other than sexy 56-year-old actress. Um,
Oh yeah, no, not directed towards her. She can hate or believe in anything she wants. I'm not gonna find her any less beautiful. That's not what that is. It's not a shameful word. Let's not attack him personally, but I'll find a way to make it eloquent. I'm gonna use AI to brainstorm some ideas.
no, I think that's beautiful. Well, we covered a lot this week. I appreciate your time, John. Uh, During the main episode, for those who have not heard it but are listening to this bonus episode, we talked almost exclusively about computer workstations for IT professionals and anybody who really gets a little anal about their workstation, like John and I do. And
Mm.
John has a different setup than I do. But anyway, I encourage you, if you're interested in ways to improve your workstation and thus improve your productivity, your efficiency, your profitability, yeah, check out that main episode. And yeah, certainly appreciate your opinions about dopamine and dopamine stacking and this whole science of biochemistry that we typically don't think about, but it seems to really influence our behavior and our happiness in life, from what you've told me, John.
Definitely something to be checked in with, and take note of, and just start noticing how you react and not react to things based on, I guess, your wins in a day. It's more complex. I'll probably make an episode or write an article about it from this, but feel free to reach out to either one of us about any questions that you may have on things that we cover in these main episodes and bonus episodes. Be happy to expand.
Especially questions about Bad Sisters, because I can just totally fill you in. I am a genius
Nice.
on Bad Sisters. I've seen each episode twice. But anyway, so This has been the Kurt and John Talk Tech and AI podcast. This is a bonus episode for this week. I want to thank my co host, John Bailey from beautiful Las Vegas and the Mindset Genesis for joining me and sharing his experiences and insight on all of this. And say subscribe. I never used to do that. I don't know. I was just not aggressive enough or something. But yeah, if you like what you hear, go subscribe. Just click that subscribe button, then all the notifications come to you automatically, and you're like, oh, Kurt and John dropped a new episode this week, and you can go educate yourself. Because really, at the end of the day, we don't get paid for this. We're really just trying to educate people and share our experiences, and we love hearing from you too. So be sure to comment, engage with us. We're most active on LinkedIn, but we're also both on Blue Sky and X, formerly Twitter.
You can find me anywhere. So look forward to if anybody wants to connect. Great episode. Can't wait to be on it next week.
Thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to all subscribers. Of course, thank you to my co host, John Bailey, for sharing his insight. And we will talk to you next week.
Thanks, Kurt. All right. Bye, everybody.